Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Good Friday. I guess that's sort of an oxymoron. It's not good. I mean, it's not happy. But good to be here. We're going to go over 3 bills today, all Senate bills. 3 of them cross files and 1 did not have a cross file. We're actually going to go backwards from on this list of bills, and I'd like to start with SB. Let's start with the easiest first. We'll just go right into things. We'll start with SB 359. This is a cross file of the Delegate Charkoudian's bill that we amended. That came in as sort of the Purple Line tree project that we amended into just a tree program within MDOT. And I'm not sure, but maybe Patrick, could you tell us, did they in the Senate conform to what we did, or what is the posture?
A little strange. The Senate amended our bill, just to add language, I think it came from DNR, to clarify that the projects still had to comply with other tree replacement programs that are legally required, mainly the Forest Conservation Act. We accepted that language the other day, and the amendment to this bill adds the language to the Senate bill. Okay,
great. Well, let's do that. Does a motion?
Second.
Great. Okay. All those in favor of amending to conform signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now I'd like to, we have a motion to move the bill favorably.
Second. So move.
God, we got like 3rd and 4th there too. Okay. All those in favor of the favorable motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay.
Landslide.
Landslide, yes. Great. Okay. Now let's go to SB 365. This did not have a cross file. This is Senator McCrae's bill about food desert establishments that was testified on by several people in the Senate. I watched the testimony. It was very interesting. And the bill itself, it sort of just amends a program that already exists to allow for loan forgiveness for operating costs for some of these grocery establishments within food deserts. And you only have the loan forgiven if after 5 years, if the loan recipient has maintained continuous operations at the same location during that time. And it also increases potential loan amounts from potentially $50,000 to $100,000. And it addresses maintaining access to healthy food in urban or rural food deserts. So I think this is a good bill. It's about making sure that we're supporting entities that want to help us in areas where people don't have access to healthy food. Any thoughts?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I have no problem with the bill. I think the bill is good, but there were 2 things in the fiscal note that sort of I raised questions. One was it said the portion that we're adding to forgive loans would mean there's less money for new projects. And then the second piece was on the 3rd page of the fiscal note, it said, even though the bill increases the loan amount and offers the opportunity for loan forgiveness, eligible projects must still rely on local governments to apply for designations of food deserts before they can apply to these loans. And they aren't. Nobody is. So
nobody is.
Like
Sorry,
I said, I have no problem with it.
I'm on the fiscal note. Yep.
Yeah, it's the last paragraph of page 3. So this is sort of outside the bill, but I'm just wondering, like, nobody's applying for this. So this is a great program that people aren't accessing. So like I said, it doesn't really affect the bill, but I'm just wondering if there's something else that can be done.
Right. I think that part of the idea of the loan forgiveness is that they think it would make the program work better for people, that maybe more people would actually apply. And I think the $50,000 to $100,000 idea is sort of a similar, they don't want to bother applying for $50,000. It's not enough to make a dent for some of these retailers, but $100,000 would make it more worthwhile. Sort of like, how much do we want to make scholarship recipients go for to get, a $500 scholarship, right? Like applying for ours, right? We've got to make it like worthwhile. So they actually, that's my take on it. I don't know if, who has this? Is this Patrick or Matt?
It's mine, Delegate Learman.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts?
So as I was reviewing the fiscal note and the testimony, it certainly is meant to incentivize, the changes are meant to incentivize and increase the interest in the program. I do, however, believe that it requires at the first stage, the designation of a food desert. And so that does kind of tie back into a bit of what Delegate Love had mentioned.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I wonder why local jurisdictions aren't doing that. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something to raise with, I don't know, Mako or others.
Can I chime in for a second, Brooke?
Sure.
The designation of a food desert is one thing with locals, but I mean, even though when you talk about $50,000 or $100,000 to stand up these facilities, unless you're standing it up in a commercial space that has been used for somewhat of the same products and stuff, if you have to build out something like this from scratch in a blank building, and Marvin would probably knows this very well, $50,000 or $100,000 is not is a substantial amount of money, but in the long run, for standing up a facility like this, when you have to go in and meet all the health department requirement, floor drains and everything like that you have to replace, $100,000 is just a blimp in standing up a facility like this. And there, it could easily run $750,000, $1 million just to build it out before you put the first stalk of celery in there. Because the equipment and stuff like that, equipment when you buy it new is expensive as hell. When you go to, if something happens and you got to get rid of it, ain't worth nothing.
Yep.
So
I agree.
That could be some of it too. So.
Marshall, I think you're totally right. And Marshall Klein, who owns many grocery stores in the state of Maryland, and specifically started a very nice grocery store in a food desert. Is that in your district, Delegate Ampry?
Which store is it? What's the name of the store?
It's in Forest Park.
No, it's not.
I don't know. It might be. Okay. I
think that's like Bridges in their district.
Yeah, I think it's Bridges district. I can't remember the lines. He testified in support of this bill and also said exactly what you just said, Delegate Clark, that this is important and he would like to see this come because it's another way to have access to funding. It's not near it. It's not near.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's ShopRite. ShopRite is the store.
ShopRite. Yeah, ShopRite. I couldn't think of the word ShopRite. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a pretty smart operator. So
he is.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
He does, especially because he's a District 46 constituent. I think these are all valid questions and concerns. It might be something that we want to send a follow-up letter to DHCD and to Mako about. I think to ask, why haven't you applied, why aren't counties applying for food desert designation, or to follow up with DHCD to see if there's something that they could do to make sure that entities know that this program is out there and exists. So.
Yeah, and the definition of a food desert, when you get out in the rural areas, I mean, it very easily could be 8 or 10 miles between the ability to go to a grocery store. But I mean, that's just part of it. So I don't know if you could consider minor town centers as food deserts because they really don't have anything but fast food and things like that. If that would be the case, you might get more people in the rural areas that would apply for that 100,000, 50 or 100,000. I don't know.
That would certainly count. Yes, Delegate Holmes.
I'm looking at the testimony. There was absolutely no one who testified in opposition of this.
Right.
Number one. And the second thing is that this is an authorizing piece of legislation where
Yes.
I think that if we move favorable on this, it will add some juice to it. And after that, maybe they will get some applications put in, because they will then know that we are serious about it as well. I think we should move favorable. As a matter of fact, I move favorable on SB 365, Madam Chair.
And I'll second.
And I just want to say thank you. I didn't mean to derail it. I totally support it. I'll
No, I think it's
forth it.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to discuss it a little.
No,
So
I
thank
think
you.
it's a good, I appreciate that. Thank you, Delegate Holmes and Delegate Clark and Delegate Love. I think it's a totally legitimate, it's a good issue. And I wonder, I mean, I do think it would be worthwhile to follow up with DHCD on the program and follow up with some of the counties to ask. Delegate Ampry is very interested in food deserts, of course, because he had, that other bill. So this might be that we could all wrap into a discussion about food deserts to prepare for next year, to bring more. And Delegate Ampry, it might even be that we could somehow amend to address this food desert issue so that jurisdictions didn't have to apply. It would just sort of be like if we did that mapping. So anyway, sorry.
I'm good.
Now I'm just.
You know how I feel about.
We have a motion favorable. Yeah. Yep. We have a motion and a second on the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay. So now SB 97 is the Purple Line Marketing Bill. We had this bill last year. Delegate Corman was a cross-file last year. This year it doesn't have a cross-file. It's about mandating funding to actually market the Purple Line. I think of this as, every day we watch a commercial, every day that we watch a TV show, there are car commercials. That is the marketing for driving. And so governments sometimes need to market the alternative to driving, which is transit. And but appropriations is primary on this bill and hasn't moved it yet. So I just wanted to see if there are any discussions or ideas or concerns, but we can't move it today because we need to wait for the primary committee. Any thoughts, concerns?
Just one question.
Jen, hold on. Delegate Tross has her hand up. Sorry.
Oh.
Delegate Tross.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't use the regular hand up. I should have. But so I completely agree that we should have advertising for transit. And I can't even remember who was showing us some old commercials for transit. Was that last year in committee? Somebody was showing us some old commercials. So I completely agree with it. I'm just curious what the impetus was for Purple Line versus, is there a reason Purple Line versus other lines? There must be a reason. I just don't know it. But I
think just because it's, I think it's just because it's new.
Okay. I support this. I just was curious.
My internet. All right. My internet is really spotty. I keep getting told that I have unstable internet. So I'm sorry if I'm going in and out.
You aren't, but I might be. Am I?
But what was I going to say? It's just because it's new. And so people don't know where it goes or how much it costs or what it is. It's also, folks in Prince George's County, Montgomery County are more used to WMATA, right? Services than MTA. And this will be.
That's fair.
So,
I mean, I don't live where there's lines. So yeah.
Right.
So,
Madam Chair.
Okay. I support it.
Yeah. Delegate Siliberti.
Yes. Does anybody remember the price tag on the Purple Line? Or don't we want to discuss that?
We don't really need to discuss that right now, but it's also a P3. And so the price tag is not as easily determined as if it were a direct appropriation and it was all in the CTP.
Well done.
Delegate Stewart?
Yeah, sure. So I was just going to say, just echo Delegate Terraz's comments that I think this is a really, really smart idea and a really good bill. I mean, just knocking doors in Montgomery County along where a lot of this line is going to go. I know firsthand that residents are confused about the Purple Line. They don't understand that it's not actually connected to Metro or not explicitly sort of run by the Metro system. They don't actually know where the lines are going to be. They don't know when it opens. They don't know where it stops. And so I think because we've spent the dollars, as Delegate Siliberti mentioned, to build this world-class, crucial east-west linkage, it would be a shame not, pony up a couple more bucks to make sure
Yep.
knows about it and that ridership is successful out of the gates, because we all know if ridership is not successful on a new transit line, it just is a sinking ship to the bottom. So I think it's especially because it's a P3, it's in all taxpayers' interest to make sure that people know about and ride this new line.
Yeah, agreed. Delegate Terrassa. And we're just going to hold this today.
I know.
We can't move until approach.
I completely agree, and I'm just laughing because
I can't
that is
hear
true
you.
in my entire district of every transit mode whatsoever. We don't know anything about it, so that is probably a good place for Howard County to be spending some money. But yes, thank you for saying that, Delegate Stewart.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to set that aside for now and wait for appropriations to act.
I think Delegate Clark has a question.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Sorry, go ahead, Delegate Clark.
Brooke, did they change, has there been any change in the bill that made it a mandated $500,000 or?
It is a mandate.
It still is a mandate?
It is still a mandate. Yeah.
Okay, because I wonder with the amount of money that's going into it and the P3 people, you would think they'd have a vested interest into putting some advertising money into it too, because they're only successful if people use it. So, I guess the question is should it be a mandated thing, or if the P3 people come up with money to advertise it also, it may not need to spend as much in the state money to do that. And I'm all for advertising it. It needs to be successful. So just
well, I will say, yeah, no, I agree, Delegate Clark. I will say $500,000 is a drop in the bucket for advertising to Prince George's and Montgomery County. All of us know, because we have to buy mailers. We know it costs to send mail to people, and it's not inexpensive.
I realize that.
Yeah, just coming from a rural perspective, we've constantly seen money taken from the Transportation Trust Fund. We've never seen a restoration of the highway use revenues to the locals, and we continue to deal with trying to maintain and improve roads. So I'm not sure I understand, maybe $500,000 is not a lot of money, but I have no idea where the $500,000 came from and whether or not that is enough to develop a marketing plan. And I just don't like additional monies from marketing being taken out of the Transportation Trust Fund. Second.
Yeah, well, I think the idea is, this marketing plan would be this would be a small piece of the overall marketing. But this would help the plan, and they would work with the P3, with Amtrak, with WMATA, with local governments. Everybody would be putting it together, and this would sort of be our good faith piece into that. But we are not going to vote on it today, so just set it aside for now, and we're going to wait for our appropriations colleagues to take action. Okay, so now I want to turn to SB 121. This is a cross-file to Delegate Turner's bill. We heard it from Senator Patterson and Senator Benson. And it is, first I'm just going to ask Kristen if she can go through what the bill does. And then I think there are a number of folks on who might have comments that they would like to share. And I just encourage the members to ask questions. We're not going to vote on this bill today. This is for discussion purposes only. And I ask that anybody who has an amendment after today's discussion to please bring it, let's get it done over the weekend. So Kristen, do you want to help walk us through the bill, please?
Sure. So the bill that came over from the Senate is enabling. It authorizes a local government to require a detailed statement and analysis of environmental and public health impacts to be prepared on receipt of an initial application for a special exception to construct or operate a permanent facility. So this would be any facility that requires an air quality permit, a hazardous, let me get the list, a controlled hazardous substance facility permit, or a refuse disposal permit. It also requires the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities to to study, make recommendations regarding strategies for increasing state support of local governments and communities in addressing environmental justice concerns. And that's
Great. Okay. Does anybody, what questions out there are there? We didn't have a very robust hearing about this, so I thought it would be helpful to go over questions and answers now.
I got a question.
Yes, Delegate Holmes.
So this bill is not relevant to any specific type of business entity. This then would apply to all businesses, all kinds of businesses then. Is that correct? Is I'm understanding it right?
I'm going to defer to you, Kristen, or others.
So this would be any facility that is applying for a special exception, and that would have a facility that requires one of those 3 environmental permits. So
Okay,
it's the bill that came in initially applied to landfills, and this does expand application to facilities that require those 3 types of environmental permits.
Okay, all right. So that would be any industry or entity that requires a special exception. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Thank you.
That requires the permit, and then they're applying for a special exception in an area zoned for residential use. I'm not sure if I said that initially.
Okay, thanks a bunch.
I'm going to call on Delegate Love and then Delegate Terraza, but one question I had is, what is area? Is that, I mean, is there, I know area, I'm just wondering if that should, does that mean census tract? Does that mean in a quarter mile?
In an area zoned for residential use? So that the land use zoning that applies?
Okay, so, but by area, does that mean, I guess I just don't know how big of how the mileage of like, if an area, does that mean like if they're applying for a permit within the same census, within a census tract that's zoned for residential use, or can it be next to the census tract zoned for residential? Or I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get clarity on that.
Well, right now it's drafted, it says, if this is in the area, it doesn't say next to the area.
Okay. Okay, so in. Okay, sorry, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So last summer, New Jersey passed a comprehensive cumulative impacts bill addressing the fact that so often so many things that pollute the area are placed into certain communities. And in looking at bringing that bill to Maryland, I actually filed that bill and then withdrew it because it wasn't ready for prime time. One of the things we really talked about a lot is a lot of the problems are with zoning. So I really appreciate this bill because it's going to the zoning aspect of it. And it's taking a look at, okay, we have all of these things here right now. If we add something else, how bad is it? Are we tipping the point where it's okay, but it's not great. But if we add this, it's really going to be horrible for this area. So we need to look someplace else. So I provide that little bit of background and thought because I think this is a really good and important piece of the puzzle in looking at exactly where we are putting these facilities.
Thank you. Delegate Terraza.
I'm a little confused about what we mean by these facilities, because if you're talking about refuse disposal, what does that mean? Like, I'm thinking of like the county dump. Is that a refuse facility? Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
Well, because that, I don't, maybe I'm wrong. I'm trying to think of how ours is zoned, but I don't think that would be actually on land zoned residential. It would be next to land zoned residential. Like it would be surrounded by land zone residential, but I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I've got to check but I can check ours, but that confuses me a little bit to say in an area, because I think what we're getting at is in that area, right around where residential. Sarah seems to have an answer to that.
If I may jump in, Madam Chair, I think you do raise a really good point, Delegate Terrassa, but part of it also is that there are some facilities that currently exist that they're adding more into that area, and it's not just for, you know, a dump or something like that. It's other facilities that may seem relatively innocuous of and in themselves, but added to the cumulative impact. So you do have a point about in the area, but there's also a problem of areas, neighborhood areas that, you know, one industrial thing is granted an exception, and then another one is, and then another one is, and then that neighborhood is taken over.
Yeah, no, I completely support what you're trying to, what they're trying to do and what you're talking about, Delegate Love. What I'm concerned about is that area is vague if it's not the actual land that's zoned that way. And if it's narrow and it's only the land that's zoned that way, we might be missing the stuff in that's in a dump, for example. But
well, you've done more zoning than I have, so I defer to you on that one.
So I think we might be missing that, but then I wonder who else has that kind of permit, like with a restaurant or dry cleaners or that kind of. So are we like bringing in those folks because they have that zoning, but we're not picking up who, well, we might also want to pick those up. I don't know because I'm not as familiar with this issue itself, but are we picking up those smaller facilities and then not picking up, like if you want to build a dump right next to a residential area. So I want to make sure we're getting those.
Yeah, no, I think that's
not necessarily the others. If
Delegate Clark, Delegate Holmes. I'm losing track. Delegate
Chair,
Clark,
there were others before me.
I couldn't tell who came up first. Delegate Clark, then Delegate Stewart, then Delegate Ampry.
Okay, just a couple quick questions. First, if you have an existing site that we're talking about, I think what I remember in that bill, it was something about in a 2-mile radius or a 2-mile area of a residential area that, and what if the facility already exists? Say, just use landfill, for example, and somebody proposes to build a residential community, say within a mile or 3/4 of a mile of that existing facility. Does this bill kind of flip over and cause the developer that wants to do the residential area to have to do all them tests and mitigate or have that facility upgraded, forcing the county to try to upgrade it? That's one question. And the second question is, in the rural areas, we tend to not just have a landfill, but we don't have street side pickup of trash. So out in our areas, we have what we call green box sites. And these green box sites started out years ago as just 4 or 5 dumpsters. But now they're multi-million-dollar areas that collect all the recyclables, oil, everything environmental, and maybe have 8 or 10 dumpsters. And the people bring their trash and refuse from their homes to put in it. And they tend to be near more dense populated residential areas for the convenience of the citizens that are there. Would they be included as one of these facilities in this bill?
So I think Kristen's better positioned, but I'll jump in first and just say, my understanding is no, because it says an initial application for a special exception to construct or operate. So if it's already there, then it's not going to be affected. But if it wants to expand its operations, I guess that's the best example, to expand its operations, then yes, they would fall under this.
Or renew the application.
But that's the part that bothers me, because these sites some of them we have now are still small ones and need to be expanded. And just the funds just haven't been allotted to do it, but you're doing them like one at a time. So the older ones we have that are going to need to be expanded to meet all the recycling requirements and to get rid of oils and paints and computers and TVs and just household trash or need to be expanded. Will this bill prohibit that and make it become a problem for the counties to be able to do this? Because the counties don't necessarily, they get a special exception to put it there from the Board of Appeals, the zoning appeals, but it usually is a fairly automatic thing. And they're established now, and some of them are smaller, and they're going to need to be bigger as we put more requirements on recycling. So are we putting some of the counties in a bad situation?
If the county adopts the, the county now, this legislation is enabling, so it'd be up to the county to require that. Mm-hmm. Then it would come into play during the initial application process or an application to extend or renew.
So it's just enabling legislation to have to conform to that issue. So a lot of the rural areas probably wouldn't do that.
I want to make sure everybody gets a chance. Delegate Ampry and then Delegate Holmes.
Yep. I mean, I think Delegate Clark kind of started going towards the area of this bill where I'm concerned in the concept of not so much expansion, but if you want to renew a permit. So if you already are in existence in an area, I'm thinking about my district and I'm thinking about Baltimore as a whole. You have a lot of mixed use. You have a lot of mixed use spaces. So to have, I think this bill could possibly harm. I'm thinking about like small businesses that would possibly be, harmed by this in the way in which they would try to renew their permit and it'd be legal for them to reject their renewal of their permit, and then there goes their business. Because I think it's page 4 of line 13 says it's not just for expansion, it's also renewing of a permit, right? So I think
it's renewing of a special exception.
Okay, right. So you would lose. I mean, if your special exception is how you thrive as a business, I mean, there goes a business. I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that we're not. I think the idea of moving forward with new things, that makes sense, but to harm existing entities and businesses is somewhat problematic for me.
Okay.
I wanted to better understand if I'm reading this, and it's also, this bill is a little confusing for me as a whole, but just trying to get a better understanding on that and how that would impact those. So would this allow a jurisdiction to not renew a special exception, therefore the entity would be gone?
I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, they could. So on page 5 is where I'm starting line 11. It would authorize the local government body to deny or condition the approval of an application based on actual or anticipated environmental or health impacts of the permanent facilities on the surrounding community.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first question on the residential neighborhood or residential area part, Delegate Ampry partially brought up one of my concerns, which is that entire residential communities? Like, are we talking about in a single family neighborhood that's zoned 100% residential? Or could this apply to some sort of, Euclidean zoning plot that is mixed use and has a mix of residential and industrial? I
think that goes back to my question about what is the definition of area.
Yeah, and Kristen, I guess, answered that it has to be in the area, right?
Well, I'm saying not saying it has to be. I'm saying the words on the paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
What the draft says is that it's in an area zoned for residential use.
Right. So
we have to look into that more to see what that means. We can do that, but I'm just telling you what the bill says.
And how I read that is probably that the county would have, since it's enabling, the county would probably have pretty far latitude to define what does in an area mean and what does residential mean. So I think that could be end up being pretty expansive. But My second question is just on this study. I think there was someone in the opposition testimony mentioned that the Environmental Justice Commission may not have like zoning expertise such that they should be promulgating this study. And I was just wondering if anyone had any, I'm not familiar enough with the Environmental Justice Commission. I actually think that there's a lot of interesting work that could be done about the sustainability of zoning, not just in terms of like bad uses coming into neighborhoods, but in terms of walkability, transit accessibility, farmers markets, mixed use zoning and smart growth. There's a lot of interesting stuff that we could do. I'd love to see a study take place on that, about how we sort of promote health and equity in zoning. It's larger than I think just what the bill contemplates, but I'm just wondering if the Environmental Justice Commission is the best entity to carry that out.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
That was amended out too.
And I talked to
can I point out something with the testimony, and it's something you might have figured out, but the testimony on the Senate bill is populated with both the testimony that was submitted in EHE and the testimony that was submitted in E&T. And so I know there was some confusion about what was opposition, what was favorable. For this piece, that study has been modified to make recommendations regarding strategies for increasing support of local governments and communities in addressing environmental justice concerns. So language relating to local zoning decisions was amended out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Could I just make one? I just want to add one thing to that second question, Delegate Stewart. I talked with Delegate Boyce last night because, of course, she's our colleague and is on the Environmental Justice Commission. And she clarified that the EJ Commission doesn't have the capacity to do a study, right? Like they can't do a study. So that we would need to find we would need to have that study done by some other entity. So we could, require MDE to contract with, somebody to do a study, in conjunction or in consultation with the Environmental Justice Commission. But the EJ Commission itself can't do the study. So
maybe the Center for Smart Growth at University of Maryland College Park.
Yeah, actually that might make a lot of sense. So it would need to be something like that. Yeah. Yep. And Delegate Holmes, sorry.
Yes, I just want to kind of give you my experience that I've had in my decades of being in a land development arena. What we would normally do is, if you go to a zoning chart and you look at the zoning chart in any county that we would do a land development project, and on that zoning chart, it will tell you all the approvable or approved land uses or uses in that zoning, whether it's residential, mixed use, whatever. You go down the chart and you see that this use that you're proposing is approvable, but it requires to go to a special exception. A special exception can apply to something as small as different types of fencing or trees, width of trees as a buffer. So the special exceptions would be required based upon the zoning, and it's mostly in the residential uses that you have to go through the special exceptions. So anything that's in that chart that says special exception, this is the process that you would have to go through. And then the other part is, we talked about it already, but expansions, I think would also be relevant to this special exception process as well. So I appreciate the fact, Brooke, that you're having this discussion, because there's a lot of unanswered questions here. And I just wanted to chime in with me being in land development for 30 years and how we go through this thing.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Delegate Terraza.
Is it possible, do we have a list of what this would apply to, or can we get it? Because I guess where I'm confused is, and I think Delegate Holmes did a good job of explaining special exception in part. This one has, from your experience throughout the state, this one has a definition of what the special exception permitted facilities are. And I know, for example, in Howard County, a special exception might be, there's all sorts of special exceptions. Like you might need a special exception for like a church for a particular area, but this has, have permitted facilities as an air quality permit to construct or permit to operate issued under Title II, Subtitle 4 of the environmental article. I have no idea what those are. So it'd just be good to know what we're aiming at. And then the next one is a refuse disposal permit issued under 9204. So that at least sounds more, it at least sounds more like something you'd know what it is. And a controlled hazardous substance facility permitted under 7232 seems more like something we know what it is, but I have no idea what all of what is covered under one. Is there a list somewhere that, I mean, I don't know what happens when you go to that Title II, Subtitle 4. Do we have a list of those?
I haven't seen a list.
I don't have one.
Nobody has a list, Delegate Trust. If it's not online or in the testimony, I don't think we have it.
I mean, is that something MDE has, or?
It's, Jen, I'll talk with you offline, but it's in, I mean, if you go through the code, it'll tell you.
Oh, okay, so it is in the code. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Delegate Stewart, and then there are a couple people who joined, and I'd like to just give Pam and Tyler and Ariel, like 1 to 2 minutes to just say what you'd like to see, what your thoughts, and then we'll break. So Delegate Stewart.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for the second about it. But just very briefly, I reread the bill. There's nothing in this tying it to any particular like affluence in neighborhoods, right? There's no like area mean income restriction on counties or areas.
Nope.
I just worry that, I mean, having an unintended consequence here, if only wealthier counties opt into this and make it harder to locate these uses in wealthier counties or in wealthier neighborhoods, may have the unintended consequence of the counties who don't opt in to this enabling legislation, would have lower area mean incomes, could actually be locating more of these facilities there, and we could have the opposite effect as intended if we don't have any income or means test to it. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just sort of talking out loud, or thinking out loud.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. Pam, do you want to, thanks for joining us this morning. You want to share your thoughts briefly?
Yes, I will. And also just obviously your discretion. Mike Powell is also on the phone, and he represents some interests that got brought into this bill that weren't there before and may have some clarifications. Thank you for all your listening to this conversation as part of, I'm going to just reiterate, the language of this bill is tremendously confusing and very difficult to interpret. And so even conceptually, if you like the idea of looking at this, defining it in the way it's done in the bill will create a lot of questions and issues. But you should understand the air permit piece of it is a lot. People think, oh, air permit, it must be, some big cement kiln. It can be a temporary generator. It is grinding gravel. There are so many different air permits. This is not a small area. This is not just your big cement kiln. And so you've brought in a tremendous number of permits, but that weren't originally in the bill, that could create a lot of confusion, and restaurants that have outdoor certain kinds of things could be brought in. It's back again to what Delegate Holmes said in terms of you have your list of what triggers a special exception. And in some areas, particularly residential, it could be very minor things. So you're bringing in a lot of things that then become very potentially politicized, even if no one sitting here would have thought it would have been included. But aside from that, it also doesn't include other things that, like, you all want to encourage composting, but I would bet most of you wouldn't want the compost facility in your neighborhood or in areas now that are considered for environmental justice purposes. So, but if you wouldn't want them always to be focused in that area, why aren't they included? So it's a very somewhat arbitrary, but also overly broad definition that we don't think has been very, carefully thought out, even if you did like this idea, not that we do. And then reiterating the issue on the Environmental Justice Commission's ability to do the study, even though it's been amended somewhat, it says make specific recommendations, which means they've already decided the answer before the study's done. So at this juncture, we think that there's just a lot of provisions and confusion within this bill that's going to have a lot of negative, not the least of which is renewals, because you certainly don't want to affect existing facilities that may even have been there long before it was ever residential.
Yep. Thank you. Ariel King.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel King. I am a law clerk with the Chesapeake Legal Alliance. I think a few of you have seen my face so far this session a few times already. I just wanted to add a few considerations and thoughts to this conversation. First, the CLA recommends adding industrial stormwater and permits and major air permits, excluding small sources, in accordance with Title V of the Clean Air Act and the CPCN, or the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, so that it doesn't, encompass those aspects of it. But we wanted to make sure that industrial stormwater permits and air permits were also included in the purview of this bill. We also encourage changing the date for the reports to happen sooner rather than later. There was a change to that, and so we just wanted to encourage that language to be shifted. We also wanted to talk about the strengthening and providing consistency on who can do the analysis for the reports to determine whether a special exception permit will have impacts on environmental and public health impacts. And so we were recommending either compiling a certain list of third-party contractors, or providing specific provisions that must be met in every single report that is conducted. So, and then I just also wanted to reiterate that if something is in mixed use or something of that nature, overall, the purpose is to make sure that there isn't an adverse environmental or public health impact to communities. And so, if there is compliance already, like in a restaurant or something of that nature, then most likely this bill wouldn't necessarily apply to those facilities. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Tyler.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick statement that the date change came from the Environmental Justice Commission. So please do not move the date forward. Thank you.
Delegate Terraza, you're going to have the last word, and then we'll break. And like I said, if folks have ideas for amendments or thoughts on the bill generally, we will keep discussing this over the weekend. So thank you.
Yeah, because it wasn't really last word. It was just a question if Ariel had these in writing and could send them to us.
We're drafting specific language right now, and we will have it available very soon.
Delegate Weibel, then you get the last word.
Well, maybe not. I noticed Ms. Casemeyer had mentioned Mr. Powell on the line as well. I didn't know if he had any comments to make or not. Are we allowing him to speak as well?
Oh, sure. I thought that Pam was speaking for him.
I'll be extremely brief if I could. And for background, those you don't know me, I was for 10 years the chief counsel for the Maryland Department of the Environment. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things there were questions on. It would apply to existing facilities, not just new facilities. The air permit requirement would apply if you switched out any components of your system. So if you had an emergency generator and you switched it to a different emergency generator, you're going to have to get it. It also would apply to things as small as dry cleaners. So every dry cleaner in the state would have to go through this process if the general area in which they are located is residential. It's also not limited to economically distressed communities or minority communities. If you were putting a dry cleaner in downtown Potomac, if you want to call it a downtown, you're going to have to go through this process. And I think it becomes a mechanism for people who don't want things in their backyard to stop them being in their backyard. After all, if the standard is an anticipated health impact from a dry cleaner, then I think people will come up with reasons why they think that should be stopped. And in fact, a new permit for an existing dry cleaner would have to go through this process. So though I think the intent of the bill was good, I think the problem is the application is not. It applies everywhere in the state. It applies to, once it was expanded beyond landfills to air quality permits, to renewable facilities. And I think a more targeted bill could be done, but I don't think this achieves that.
Well, thank you. And if you have suggestions or thoughts, feel free to email me or other subcommittee members with how you end it. We're always happy to see your ideas. So thank you all for joining today. I'll see you in an hour on the floor. Talk to you soon. Bye.